Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons back in the 70s. When I first started, it was called Chainmail. I started running Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in 1979. I've been playing this a long, long time. I've been running it for more than 40 years. As a dungeon master, you have tons of ways to challenge your players. The whole purpose of the dungeon master is to create an adventure that's challenging and exciting and fun for the players. Remember, the first rule of being a dungeon master is to make sure your players are having fun. If they are having fun and enjoying the game, you have succeeded. Many players simply want to kill and plunder their way through the game, and if that's what they want, cool. The best players want a challenge. This creates more enjoyment for you as well as for them. Challenging your player characters without overpowering them can be difficult in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. There are many things to consider when you're talking about what monsters to run against them. The first thing you have to consider is the monster's hit dice versus the player character's levels. You also have to consider the number of player characters versus the number of the monsters. For example, you can put a number of smaller monsters against. Like if you have 4 8th level characters, for example, you can put a bunch of 5th and 6th hit die, 5 and 6 hit die critters against them, but you have to outnumber the player characters. One thing a lot of dungeon masters overlook is the fact that if you're running a 0 level peon, an army of 0 level peons against player character fighters, the fighter class in the game, fighter types, get 1 attack per level versus these 0 level peons. So if you have an 8th level fighter, can get 8 attacks against the 0 level peons, as I recall, something along those lines. So when you're running 0 level peons, make sure you're bringing a lot. That's all I'm saying. But the point about monsters is you have to compare their hit dice versus the level of the player characters. You also have to consider the different abilities, and you have to consider the numbers on each side. If the hit dice of the monster is smaller, you need to run more of them. You have to consider the damage per attack that the monsters do versus the player characters' hit point totals. If you have a number of player characters and they've all been rolling fairly crappy on their hit points, you don't want a monster that's going to kill them outright. You want to challenge them, but you don't want to just butcher them, you know. So keep that in mind. You also have to consider the monster's armor class versus the player character's attack capabilities. If your player characters have bonuses, they have really crappy bonuses to hit, you don't really need a really strong armor class. You know, 2 or 3 probably will work, depending on what bonuses the player characters have. I hesitate to run a monster with an armor class of 0 against anything lower than 4th level, unless you have really exceedingly powerful low-level characters, because that can happen too. But like I said, it's a judgment call on the dungeon master. You want to challenge them. You don't want to overpower them. You also have to consider the monster abilities versus the player character's defenses. Some monsters, like for example, I did a video on the gibbering mauler. That thing can be nasty because of its gibbering ability to confuse. Player characters who are stunned just stand there. They're considered prone, which means they're easy to hit. You see what I'm saying? Monster abilities versus player characters' defenses. All that needs to be taken into effect. A monster that can take away the player's abilities to defend themselves, yeah, that's pretty nasty. I did a video on a shadow dragon. Go check that one out. That one's nasty. That one is nasty. Its breath weapon really, really weakens characters. So just keep that in mind. Monster defenses, you have to consider the monster's defenses versus the player character's attacks. You don't want to overpower the players, but you also don't want to put wimpy monsters up against them, because the monsters die quickly, the players don't have any fun. You see what I'm saying? If you want to challenge your players, you need to challenge the players. If your monsters can't defend themselves against whatever item the player characters have, it's not going to be fun. It's a cakewalk. You also have to consider your player characters. Are they effective players? 2 4th level fighters that rolled max on their hit points and have +1 weapons. Yeah, they're being run by 2 different players. The players are different. Not all players are the same. If they're effective players, they think through the situation, they make good combat decisions, that kind of thing. you can put something a little bigger and badder against them. Players who make poor decisions, charge into combat recklessly, no matter what. Okay, well, you see a guy coming at you down the road. He's walking along. He seems to be carrying a bundle over his shoulder. Kill him! Get him! You know, that kind of thing. Yeah, those guys, they may have badass characters, but they don't think well. That guy could have the means to get them a lot more if they don't hack him to pieces. You see what I'm saying? It depends on how they play. Are the players' die rolls reasonable? I have played with player characters who are smart. Players who are smart. Their characters are awesome, but their die rolls kill them. I talked about Randy and a number of other players in my game. I have seen players fumble 5 times in a row, and it's just bad luck. I mean, again, how lucky are they? You can only do so much. I saw one orc kill 2 5th level fighters because they kept fumbling and he rolled 1 crit. Players are it shouldn't come down to luck, but damn it does. You cannot ignore luck, good or bad, in the game. Are your player characters lucky? Are their die rolls reasonable? You can't overlook that. I realize a lot of this is subjective, but I've seen player characters with the best plans roll a series of fumbles and half the party dies right off the bat. I've seen ancient huge red dragons killed in 1 round by lucky player characters with successive crits. I've seen 5 player characters obliterate a horde of orcs who couldn't manage to roll a 15 to hit. I've seen a single orc kill 4 party members because the players played stupidly. You know your players, and you know how they play. Their die rolls, how effective they plan, how engaged they are, etc. The abilities of their characters, how well they use those abilities. All of this must be considered in order to create an encounter that seems overpowering, but in actuality is just really challenging. Okay? A seeming impossible task will make their victory that much sweeter. When my players defeat an impossible villain and they quote-unquote rub my face in it, I consider that the champagne of victory. It means they had fun and I succeeded. I did my job. The whole point of a dungeon master is to make sure your player characters, your players, are having fun. And if they're going to rub your nose in it, enjoy it, because it means you succeeded. Hope this finds everybody well. And again, you don't have to take this advice. This is an old hack wargamer, and I'm trying to explain how I run it. And if you want to do the same, amen. If not, that's cool too. Hope this finds everybody well. You folks have a good day. God bless one and all.